In a world of chaos, there is only one thing you can control: your mind.
Stop what you're doing for just a moment. I want you to think about someone specific. Someone who gave you just enough to keep you hoping, but never enough to fulfill you. Someone who fed you breadcrumbs. Attention today, silence tomorrow. Love one moment, coldness the next. They kept you orbiting them, desperate, confused, always wondering, what did I do wrong? Be honest. Can you feel that person right now? Can you picture their face? Now here's what I want you to know, and this might sting a little. That person, they're thinking about you right now too, but not the way you want. They're not thinking about you with love or regret or longing. They're thinking about you because they're obsessed, not with love, but with you moving on. And here's the twist that changes everything. They're obsessed because you stopped needing them. Does that sound backwards? I know, but stay with me because what we're about to explore is going to fundamentally shift how you understand power, relationships, and the psychology of those who hurt us. By the end of this, you won't just understand why this happens. You'll know exactly how to make it happen using nothing but Stoic wisdom. The question I'm asking you right now is, have you ever wondered why people who treated you like an option suddenly become obsessed with you when you finally treat yourself as a priority? Let's go deeper. Part 1. The breadcrumb trap. Why people give you just enough. Imagine this scenario, and I want you to really feel it. You're in a relationship, could be romantic, could be friendship, could be family. This person is inconsistent. They text you at midnight saying they miss you, then ghost for a week. They cancel plans last minute. They show up when they need something, disappear when you need them. They're kind one day, cruel the next. They kept you orbiting them, desperate, confused, always wondering, what did I do wrong? Be honest. Can you feel that person right now? Can you picture their face? Now here's what I want you to know, and this might sting a little. That person, they're thinking about you right now too, but not the way you want. They're not thinking about you with love or regret or longing. They're thinking about you because they're obsessed, not with love, but with you moving on. And here's the twist that changes everything. They're obsessed because you stopped needing them. Does that sound backwards? I know, but stay with me because what we're about to explore is going to fundamentally shift how you understand power, relationships, and the psychology of those who hurt us. By the end of this, you won't just understand why this happens. You'll know exactly how to make it happen using nothing but Stoic wisdom. The question I'm asking you right now is, have you ever wondered why people who treated you like an option suddenly become obsessed with you when you finally treat yourself as a priority? Let's go deeper. Part 2. The psychology of loss. Why obsession follows indifference. Let me tell you a story that changed how I understood this. There was a man named David. He was in love with a woman named Sarah for 5 years. Sarah loved him inconsistently. Some weeks, she was all in, texting him constantly, making plans, telling him he was her everything. Other weeks, she'd go dark, cold, unavailable. She'd flirt with other people right in front of him. She'd cancel dates at the last minute, but she always came back just when David was about to walk away. David spent 5 years doing everything. He learned her coffee order by heart. He showed up unannounced with flowers. He stayed up late listening to her problems. He made excuses for her behavior to his friends. He diminished his own needs to make room for her chaos. And Sarah? She took it all for granted. She never appreciated it. She just expected it. Because that's what breadcrumbs do. They train you to be grateful for scraps. One day, David had an awakening. It wasn't dramatic. He wasn't angry. He just understood. He realized that no amount of effort would make Sarah choose him consistently, because Sarah's problem wasn't David. Sarah's problem was Sarah. Sarah needed the uncertainty to feel powerful. She needed David to chase so she could feel desired. So, David stopped. He didn't make an announcement. He didn't block her or write her a letter. He simply redirected his energy. He started going to the gym. He picked up painting, something he'd abandoned years ago. He joined a friend group. He went on dates with other people. He was still kind to Sarah when they crossed paths, but he was gone. Within 2 weeks, Sarah started texting him obsessively. "Why are you ignoring me? Are you with someone? I never see you anymore. Can we talk? I miss you. I think I made a mistake." For the first time in 5 years, Sarah was the one reaching out constantly. Sarah was the one left wondering. Sarah was obsessed. But here's the crucial part that most people miss. David didn't feel victorious. He didn't feel the rush of, "I won." He felt nothing because he'd already moved on. He'd already stopped needing her validation. And that's when the Stoic wisdom clicks in. Epictetus taught, freedom is not procured by a full enjoyment of what is desired, but by controlling the desire itself. The moment David stopped desiring Sarah's approval, he became free. And his freedom was so powerful, so magnetic, that Sarah became obsessed with reclaiming him. This is the Stoic paradox. You become irresistible when you stop trying to be attractive. You become powerful when you stop seeking power. You become valuable when you stop demanding to be valued. Why does this happen psychologically? Because humans are wired to chase what's scarce. A person who's always available, always trying, always hoping, they become a utility, not a prize. But the moment that person becomes unavailable, suddenly they transform in the other person's mind. They go from something ordinary to something precious. It's the scarcity principle in action. Psychologist Robert Cialdini documented this extensively. People want what they can't have. The more someone pulls away, the more the other person reaches out. But, and this is important, the obsession that follows isn't love. It's loss. It's ego. It's the discomfort of losing control. And the Stoic who understands this dynamic is never fooled by it. Part 3. The moment everything shifts, the invisible crossing point. There's a precise moment when the dynamic changes. It's invisible, but it's real. And I want you to understand exactly what happens in that moment because it's the key to everything. The person who gave you crumbs has built their sense of security on your need for them. They might not be conscious of it, but they've organized their self-worth around your devotion. On some level, they know you'd reorganize your entire life for a kind word from them. And that knowledge is intoxicating. But then something happens. You stop reorganizing your life. You don't do it out of anger. You don't do it to hurt them or teach them a lesson. You do it because you finally respect yourself too much to keep degrading yourself for someone who doesn't reciprocate. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." He meant stop talking about changing, stop planning to change, stop wishing you'd change, just change. And the moment you truly change, not performatively, but genuinely, the person who relied on your inconsistency starts to panic. Let me break down exactly what happens in their mind. Week 1 of your change, they don't notice much. They might text and get a brief response instead of an immediate one. They might notice you're busier, more focused on other things, but they assume it's temporary. They assume you'll come back to them. Weeks 2 through 3, they start to feel the shift. They realize you're not asking them questions anymore. You're not seeking their validation. You're not canceling plans to be available. Your energy has genuinely moved elsewhere, and something in their nervous system registers, this feels different. Week 4, here's where the obsession typically begins, because now it's real. They can't deny it anymore. You're actually gone. Not physically maybe, but energetically. And suddenly, they're confronted with a terrifying question. What if I actually lost them? And here's what's devastating for them, but liberating for you. They didn't lose you because you stopped loving them. They lost you because you started loving yourself. The obsession that follows is their attempt to restore the familiar dynamic. They'll reach out with intensity. They might oscillate between apologies and accusations. They might try to make you jealous. They might suddenly change and promise they'll be better until you fall back in line, and then they revert. But you, if you're truly following Stoic principles, you won't fall for it. Because Seneca warned, as long as you chase after what's outside, you're wasting what's inside. You finally started chasing what's inside. Your own peace, your own growth, your own dignity. And that's not something they can disrupt. Here's the psychological truth that most people don't want to hear. The person who obsesses over you after you leave isn't obsessing because they suddenly realized your worth. They're obsessing because they've lost control. And people are addicted to control. Think about it from their perspective, not to excuse them, but to understand them. For months or years, they could text you at 3 a.m. and you'd respond. They could cancel plans and you'd reschedule around them. They could give you minimal effort and you'd be grateful. They had power. They had predictability. And now, you're unpredictable. You're not playing by the old rules anymore. And an unpredictable variable in someone's life is deeply unsettling. It creates anxiety. It creates urgency. It creates obsession. This is the moment where most people make a mistake. They see the obsession, they interpret it as proof that the other person finally cares, and they let themselves be pulled back in. But the Stoic knows better. The Stoic recognizes that this obsession is not love, it's not redemption, it's not a reason to return. It's simply a person's ego having a tantrum because it lost its toy. And the Stoic has no interest in being anyone's toy. Part 4. Why they become obsessed. The neuroscience and Stoicism. I want to take you deeper into the neuroscience of this because understanding the why helps you maintain your power. When someone treats you inconsistently, giving you attention, then withholding it, your brain enters a state of variable reward. This is the same mechanism that makes slot machines so addictive. Your brain doesn't get a consistent reward, it gets an unpredictable reward. And unpredictable rewards are more addictive than consistent ones. So when the breadcrumb giver occasionally showers you with attention, your brain floods with dopamine. You feel seen, valued, desired, but then they withdraw and your dopamine crashes. And so you keep coming back, hoping for that dopamine hit again. This is what keeps you trapped. But here's where it gets interesting. When you leave, you flip the script. Now they enter the variable reward cycle. They've gotten used to having you as a constant in their life. You were the variable reward mechanism for them. You were always there, always trying, always forgiving. And now you're gone. And their brain starts craving that stimulation. They text you, hoping for a response. And when you don't respond immediately, their brain is flooded with discomfort. They achieve a small dopamine hit when you finally respond. So they text again, more urgently, trying to recreate that reward. This is obsession through the lens of neuroscience. But the Stoic understanding goes deeper. Marcus Aurelius would have said, their obsession is not your responsibility. Their discomfort at losing control is not your problem to solve. They created this dynamic, and now they're experiencing the consequences of that creation. Epictetus was even blunt. If someone handed your body to an enslaver, you would be outraged. But you hand your will to anyone who insults you, to anyone who annoys you, to anyone who upsets you, and then you're surprised that you're not free? The person who gave you crumbs was essentially enslaving your will, training it to respond to their moods, their needs, their timeline. And when you finally freed your will, they experienced that freedom as a loss. Their obsession is them trying to re-enslave you, and the Stoic response is simple. No, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of respect for the freedom you've reclaimed. Here's what happens when you truly understand this. You stop seeing their obsession as flattering. You stop interpreting it as proof that they finally care. You recognize it for what it is, a person experiencing the discomfort of losing power over you. And that recognition is the most powerful thing you could possibly have. Because once you see through their obsession, it loses all its power over you. Part 5, the Stoic response. How not to get pulled back in. So they're obsessing. They're texting constantly. They're apologizing. They're promising change. They're telling you they miss you. They need you. They realize what they lost. And you're sitting there reading these messages, feeling your resolve weaken. This is the critical moment. This is where most people fail. Let me tell you what the Stoic does differently. First, the Stoic recognizes this is not about you. This is about them. When someone obsesses over you after you've left, they're not suddenly seeing your true value. They're confronting their own emptiness. The space you left wasn't filled with them realizing how wonderful you are. It was filled with them realizing how much they relied on you to feel powerful. That's their work to do, not yours. Seneca wrote, "It is more honorable to be constantly beaten than sometimes to beat." What he meant? It's noble to maintain your principles even when it's hard, even when you're tempted, even when the person you've walked away from is suddenly showering you with attention. The Stoic practice here is called negative visualization, and it's brutal but effective. You imagine what will happen if you go back. Not the fantasy version where everything changes and you finally get the love you've been craving. No, you imagine the reality. You go back. For a week or two, they're attentive, kind, present. You feel the relief of being back in their orbit. But gradually, because their core patterns haven't actually changed, they revert. They start giving you crumbs again. The inconsistency returns. The coldness comes back. The breadcrumbs resume. And now you've made it worse because you've just taught them all they need to do is obsess for a while, and you'll come running back. You've taught them that their manipulation works, and you've destroyed your own credibility with yourself. You've proven to yourself that you can't actually maintain your boundaries, and that's devastating to your self-respect. So the Stoic asks herself, is that the future I want? The answer is no. Marcus Aurelius had a daily practice where he would remind himself of reality. He would visualize the worst case scenarios, not to be pessimistic, but to be prepared. He would remind himself that the people around him had flaws, that power was temporary, that everything changes. You can do the same. Write down what happens every time you go back to someone who treats you inconsistently. Write down the pattern. Write down how it feels when the kindness fades and the crumbs resume. Write down the cost to your self-respect. Now look at that list whenever you're tempted to respond to their obsessive messages. The second practice is what Stoics call amor fati. love of fate. It means accept what has happened and stop wishing it were different. They treated you badly. That's the reality. You left. That's the reality. They're obsessing now. That's the reality. And instead of wishing they'd become the person you wanted them to be, accept that they are the person who treated you poorly. Accept that people rarely change without doing deep, difficult internal work. Accept that their obsession is likely temporary. Once they find a new source of validation, they'll move on, just like they moved on from others before you. This isn't cynicism, it's clarity. And clarity is power. The third Stoic practice is radical indifference. Not coldness, not cruelty, but genuine, profound indifference to their obsession. When they text, you don't need to respond immediately. When they call, you don't need to answer. When they show up with apologies or promises, you don't need to engage. You acknowledge that they're reaching out. You might even respond, but you respond from a place of calm detachment, not from a place of hope or fear. You respond the way you might respond to someone asking for directions, helpfully, but without emotional investment. This is incredibly difficult at first, because part of you wants to believe they've changed. Part of you wants to give them another chance. Part of you craves the certainty that they'll finally be different. But the Stoic doesn't live in wants. The Stoic lives in reality. And the reality is, people who have trained you to need them rarely suddenly transform into people who respect your boundaries. Epictetus put it this way: if someone gave your body to a slave trader, you'd be angry. But you give your will to anyone who insults you, and then you're surprised you are not free. Your freedom is non-negotiable, not for their obsession, not for their promises, not for the fantasy of who they might become.
Part 6. What happens next? The cycle of obsession. If you maintain your boundaries and don't return to them, the obsession will follow a predictable pattern. Understanding this pattern helps you stay strong. Phase 1. Denial. Days 1 through 7. They can't believe you're really gone. They keep texting, convinced you'll respond like you always do. They might make it funny, light, trying to break through your walls with humor. They're still in the mindset that the old rules apply. You, stay silent or respond minimally. Phase 2. Anger. Days 7 through 14. When you don't respond, they shift. Suddenly you're ungrateful, you're cold, you're the one with the problem. They might blame you, accuse you of being dramatic, tell you that you're overreacting. This is them trying to gain control through criticism. You, don't defend yourself. Don't explain. Explanation is just another form of engagement. Phase 3. Bargaining. Days 14 to 30. Now they're apologizing. They're promising change. They're sharing vulnerable thoughts. They're showing you a version of themselves that seems different. This is the most dangerous phase because it feels like progress, but nothing has actually changed. They're just trying a different manipulation tactic. You recognize this for what it is. Stay steady. Phase 4. Desperation. Days 30 to 60. Their messages become more frequent, more emotional, more urgent. They might start reaching out through friends. They might accidentally run into you. They might start posting things on social media that are clearly directed at you. This is them in full panic mode. Their identity was tied to having you in their orbit, and now they're losing themselves. You. Compassion is okay here, but boundaries are non-negotiable. You can feel sad for them without returning. Phase 5. Acceptance or rage. Days 60 plus. One of two things happens. Either they finally accept that you're gone and move on, usually by finding a new person to give crumbs to, or they turn bitter, rewrite the story like, I was never that into them anyway, and and try to destroy your reputation. If they choose acceptance, they'll fade from your life. If they choose rage, they'll lash out. But either way, the obsession ends because it's no longer producing the results that they wanted. You remain unbothered. You've already moved on. The key insight here is this: their obsession is temporary. It's based on losing control, not on actually valuing you. And when they realize they can't regain control, they'll give up. And that's when you'll see their true character. Either someone capable of growth, or someone who moves on to the next person to manipulate.
Part 7, the freedom on the other side. Here's what no one tells you about walking away from someone who gave you crumbs. The peace on the other side is indescribable. You don't realize how much mental energy you've been spending on them until it's gone. Suddenly, you have space in your mind, space to think about your dreams, space to pursue your goals, space to invest in people who actually reciprocate. Your creativity returns, your confidence returns, your sense of humor returns. The parts of yourself that you've been suppressing for so long, they resurface. And here's something beautiful. Other people notice. People who were waiting for you to finally show up in your own life suddenly see you. Friends who missed you reappear. New people are drawn to you because you're radiating something they've been craving: genuine peace and self-respect. This is when something miraculous happens. You become genuinely attractive. Not desperate attractive, not chasing after me attractive, but authentically, powerfully attractive, because you're no longer asking anyone to complete you. You're complete in yourself. And that's infinitely more magnetizing than any breadcrumb ever was. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The person who blocked you from yourself by keeping you in a cycle of hope and disappointment, they actually pushed you toward freedom. Their crumbs were so unsatisfying that eventually you were forced to feed yourself. And now you know how to. The Stoic wisdom here is profound. You don't need their obsession to validate your worth. In fact, their obsession after you've left is proof that your worth was always there. They just needed you to leave for them to finally see it. But by then, it doesn't matter because you've already seen it in yourself. And that's the only validation that ever mattered.
Part 8, the final lesson: never again. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with the most important lesson from Stoicism about this entire dynamic. Epictetus said, "It is impossible to begin to learn that which one thinks one already knows." The people who gave you crumbs, they think they already know love. They think they already know relationships. They think the way they've learned to connect inconsistently, manipulatively, selfishly is normal. And they'll never change until they stop thinking they know and become willing to learn. But that's not your responsibility. That's their work. Your responsibility is this: never become someone who gives other people crumbs. If you truly internalize this lesson, you won't just walk away from breadcrumb givers, you'll also make sure you never become a breadcrumb giver. Because once you've felt the devastation of being treated like a crumb, you'll guard fiercely against doing that to someone else. The final practice is this: self-awareness. Check yourself. When you're connecting with someone, are you being consistent? Are you showing up? Are you honoring your commitments? Or are you falling into the pattern of giving just enough to keep them hoping? Because the Stoic path is about virtue, and virtue includes integrity in how we treat the people who care about us. If you ever catch yourself giving breadcrumbs, stop. Communicate clearly. Either commit or let them go. Give them the gift of clarity, not the torture of hope. The final truth. So here's what we've explored today. The person who only gave you crumbs will end up obsessed. not because they suddenly realized your worth, but because they lost control. And losing control is terrifying to someone whose power was built on your dependence. But, and this is crucial, their obsession is not an invitation to return. It's proof that you were right to leave. It's proof that your departure actually meant something, that you weren't easily replaced, that they did see you, they just chose not to honor you. And now they're paying the price of that choice: obsession, loss, confusion. But you've paid the price too. Years of your life, pieces of your soul, your self-respect. The question now is, what will you do with your freedom? Because freedom is only valuable if you use it to build something, not just to escape something. Will you use this lesson to finally show up for yourself the way you showed up for them? Will you give yourself the consistency, the reliability, the presence that you were willing to give to someone who didn't deserve it? This is the real victory, not their obsession, but your liberation. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Have you experienced this? Have you had someone obsess over you after you walked away? What did that look like for you? Subscribe if this resonated, because we're going to keep exploring these Stoic principles that transform how you see relationships, power, and your own worth. And remember, you deserve someone who gives you everything, not crumbs. And until that person shows up, you deserve to be alone with yourself because you're excellent company.